The gun barrel pressed cold against Marcus Cole's temple, and for a moment he wondered if Sarah could see him from wherever she was now. 3 years of running, 3 years of hiding on the edge of known space, and it had all led to this basement, 7 levels beneath the Nevada desert, kneeling before the man who murdered his wife. Victor Harlan's laugh echoed off the concrete walls. "You know something, Marcus. When I pulled the trigger on Sarah, I figured you'd die too. Bleeding out in that alien jungle all alone. But here you are 3 years later, still breathing. Like a cockroach that won't quit." Behind Marcus, chains rattled against stone. He didn't need to turn around to know what he'd see. Empress Kira Valthari, ruler of 12 tribes and commander of 300 warriors, hung from restraints designed to hold creatures twice her size. Purple blood traced lines down her face like war paint. But her eyes, those burning gold eyes, held no fear when they met his. Only trust, only certainty. The irony wasn't lost on him. 72 hours ago, she'd been ready to execute him for crimes he never committed. Now she believed in him more than he believed in himself. Harlan pressed the gun harder, forcing Marcus's head to tilt. "Tell me where the rest of them are hiding. The ship locations, the fleet coordinates. Give me that, and maybe I let your alien girlfriend live long enough to watch you die first." Marcus closed his eyes. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, mixing with the steady beep of medical equipment. Somewhere in this room, Lyra Velthari lay strapped to a table while machines drained the life from her veins drop by drop. Somewhere above them, 300 warriors waited for a signal that might never come. And somewhere in his chest, the mark Kira had placed there pulsed with warmth, sinking to his heartbeat like a second heart he'd never asked for. How did it come to this? How did a 58-year-old Air Force washout end up kneeling in a black site, choosing between his species and his soul? The answer was simple, really. It started with water, just one sip of water given to a dying stranger who turned out to be a queen. 72 hours earlier, Marcus Cole had been doing what he did every morning for the past 3 years. He woke at 0500, rolled out of the car, bolted to his ship's floor, and spent 45 minutes running diagnostics on systems that hadn't changed since yesterday. The Sarah's Hope wasn't much to look at. A converted cargo hauler with more patches than original hull, she'd been designed to move freight between mining colonies, not serve as a one-man survival station on an uncharted moon at the edge of the Orion Rim. But she was his, the last thing he owned that mattered, the last connection to a life that ended in blood and fire on a planet whose name he couldn't bring himself to speak. The morning routine never varied. Diagnostics first, then physical training. Push-ups until his arms screamed sit-ups, until his core burned a 3-mile run on the treadmill he'd salvaged from a derelict transport. At 58, his body complained louder than it used to. His knees popped when he stood too fast. His lower back seized up if he slept wrong. But discipline kept him alive, and alloy was all he had left. After training came maintenance. The humidity on this moon was a living thing, seeping through every seal and junction, coating the walls, and condensation that tasted like copper and rotting vegetation. Marcus spent 2 hours each day fighting it back, replacing filters, treating rust spots, adjusting the atmospheric processors that kept the air breathable. His father would have approved of the routine. Colonel William Cole, United States Air Force veteran of Korea, had raised his son on a simple philosophy. A man who keeps his tools sharp never gets caught dull. Marcus had carried those words through flight school, through combat missions over Kuwait, through 2 decades of service that ended not with a medal, but with a quiet discharge and a warning to keep his mouth shut about what he'd seen. The photo on his console showed a different man. Younger, softer around the edges, standing in front of the White House with his arm around a woman whose smile could light up a room. Sarah had insisted on the tourist shot, had dragged him through the entire National Mall, despite his protest that he'd rather be anywhere else. That was the day before their wedding, the last time he remembered being truly happy. Now her face watched him from a frame bolted to the console, and every morning he told her good morning, and every night he told her good night, and every moment in between, he carried the weight of his failure like a stone in his chest. The alarm changed everything. At first, Marcus thought it was a malfunction. The perimeter sensors he'd set up around the ship triggered false positives all the time, picking up local wildlife or atmospheric disturbances or the occasional seismic tremor from the moon's unstable core. He was halfway through his lunch, a protein bar that tasted like cardboard, wrapped in disappointment, When the red light started flashing on his console, motion detected, outer perimeter, large biological signature, he pulled up the camera feeds expecting to see another one of the six-legged herbivores that sometimes wandered too close to the ship. The screen showed only jungle-thick vines and phosphorescent flowers in the eternal twilight that passed for daylight on this rock. Then the vines moved. Something pushed through them, something big enough to bend stalks thick as his arm. Marcus reached for the pistol on his belt, the Colt M1911, that had belonged to his father and his grandfather before that. 3 generations of Cole men had carried this weapon. He'd be damned if he died without it in his hand. The airlock hissed when he opened it. Humid air rushed in carrying the smell of decay and something else, something sharp and metallic that made his nose twitch. He stepped onto the loading ramp, gun-raised eyes scanning the tree line. Nothing moved. The jungle had gone silent, that special kind of quiet that meant every creature within a mile was holding its breath. Then she emerged from the shadows, and Marcus Cole forgot how to breathe. She was tall, not just tall towering, 7 feet at least, maybe more, with shoulders broader than most men, and arms that rippled with muscle like braided steel cables. Her skin was the color of a desert sunset, deep purple, fading to violet at the edges, and it seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. Hair the color of starlight cascaded over those massive shoulders, matted with blood and tangled with debris from her flight through the jungle. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold. Gold, pure gold, burning with an intensity that made him feel like she could see straight through his skull to the thoughts hiding behind his eyes. Those eyes held pain and exhaustion, and something else, something that might have been hope, if hope could look that desperate. Her armor was destroyed. Plates that had probably once gleamed with warrior pride hung in shattered fragments from her frame, exposing wounds that wept purple blood. She'd been in a fight, a bad one, and she'd barely survived. She took one step toward him, and her legs buckled. Marcus moved on instinct, the same instinct that had saved his life a dozen times in combat. He caught her before she hit the ground, staggering under a weight that had to be twice his own. Up close, the heat coming off her skin was intense, like standing next to an open furnace. Her lips moved. Words came out in a language he'd never heard, guttural and musical at the same time, but her meaning was clear enough. Water. She needed water. He knew what she was. The purple skin, the golden eyes, the impossible size. Velthari. One of the warrior races that humanity had encountered during the first wave of expansion. One of the races that the Interstellar Security Act had declared enemies of Earth, subject to capture or termination on sight. Helping her was a death sentence. The laws were clear. Any human who provided aid or comfort to a Velthari individual faced mandatory execution. No trial, no appeal, no exceptions. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out the flask. The Zerion had been Sarah's idea originally. She'd discovered its properties during her research, had realized that the luminescent liquid the Velthari harvested from their sacred sites wasn't just water. It was something else, something that could heal wounds and extend life and perform miracles that science couldn't explain. She'd taken a sample, hidden it away, made Marcus promise to keep it safe. Keep it safe until someone needs it more than we do. That's what she'd said. Promise me, Marcus. Promise me you'll know when that time comes. He'd kept that promise for 3 years. Carried the flask everywhere, never used a drop, waiting for a moment that might never arrive. The alien woman's eyes were closing. Her breath came in shallow gasps. Her massive body trembled in his arms like a child fighting sleep. Someone needs it more than we do. Marcus pressed the flask to her lips. Drink. She didn't hesitate. 3 long swallows, desperate and greedy like someone who'd been dying of thirst for days. The effect was immediate. Her skin brightened. The wounds on her arms began to close, and those golden eyes snapped open with renewed intensity. For a long moment, neither of them moved. She stared at him, really stared, and Marcus felt the weight of her gaze like a physical thing pressing against his chest. He'd been looked at by generals and politicians and men who held his life in their hands, but nothing compared to this. She was measuring him, judging him, seeing something that he couldn't see himself. Then she did something he didn't expect. She reached out with one massive hand and touched the flask. Her fingers traced its surface with something like reverence. Then she pressed those same fingers to her own chest, directly over her heart. Then she touched him. Her palm landed flat against his sternum, and heat exploded through his body. Not painful heat, but warmth, the kind of warmth that sinks into bones and makes you feel alive in ways you'd forgotten were possible. Something shifted in his chest, something fundamental. And when she pulled her hand away, he could feel it still there. A presence, a connection. She spoke again, those alien words tumbling out in a whisper that sounded almost like prayer. He still couldn't understand the language, but somehow he understood the meaning. Thank you, I will remember. You are marked now. Before he could respond, before he could ask what she meant, or who she was, or how she'd ended up dying in his jungle, she pushed herself to her feet. The weakness that had nearly killed her was gone, replaced by a coiled strength that made every movement look like a predator preparing to strike. She looked at him one last time. Something passed between them in that look, something that words couldn't capture and logic couldn't explain. Then she turned and vanished into the jungle, moving through the vines like a ghost made of violet shadow. Marcus stood on his ramp for a long time, staring at the spot where she'd disappeared. The flask in his hand felt different now, lighter somehow, less important. In his chest, the warmth pulsed steadily, matching the rhythm of his heart. He didn't sleep that night. Every sound outside the hall made him reach for his gun. The jungle that had been his home for 3 years suddenly felt alien, full of shadows and secrets and things he couldn't see. His scanners picked up heat signatures, moving through the trees, too many to count, too fast to track. When dawn broke, painting the sky in shades of amber, and rose, Marcus walked to his cockpit window with a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. He rubbed exhaustion from his eyes, took a sip of the bitter liquid, and froze. They were everywhere. On every ridge, every branch, every piece of high ground surrounding his ship, warriors stood watching, hundreds of them. Their armor glowed with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed in synchronized rhythm. Their weapons hummed with barely contained power. They didn't move, didn't speak, didn't breathe in any way he could see. They simply waited. 300 pairs of golden eyes fixed on his ship like judges awaiting a verdict. And at the front, standing taller than all the rest, was the woman he'd saved. But she wasn't stumbling now. She wasn't desperate or wounded or weak. She stood with the absolute authority of someone who had never known doubt, never questioned her right to command, never met a challenge she couldn't destroy. Behind her, a figure even larger emerged from the ranks. 8 feet of muscle and menace, with tattoos that glowed across his shoulders and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite by an angry god. Marcus set down his coffee cup. His hands weren't shaking, not yet, but he could feel the tremor building somewhere deep in his gut. "Well," he said to Sarah's photograph, "I guess I found out what she meant by marked." He walked to the airlock on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. The door hissed open. The morning air hit him like a wall, thick with humidity and the electric tension of 300 warriors ready to strike. The purple woman stepped forward. Her voice rolled across the clearing, like thunder, clear and commanding in perfect English that she definitely hadn't spoken the night before. "I am Kira Velthari, Empress of the 12 Tribes, Commander of the Outer Fleet, and you human are holding something that belongs to my people." Marcus felt his stomach drop. Empress. Not a soldier, not a scout, not some warrior lost behind enemy lines. He'd saved the actual ruler of the Velthari civilization. The massive figure behind her stepped forward, and the ground seemed to shake with each footstep. His voice was deeper than any sound Marcus had ever heard, a rumble that started somewhere underground and worked its way up through the earth. Kira translated without looking away from Marcus. "My father, High Commander Theros. He wishes to know how you came to possess the blood of ancestors." "The what?" "The liquid you gave me, the substance in your flask." Her golden eyes narrowed. "Among my people, it is the most sacred substance in existence. It is not water human, it is the concentrated life essence of our fallen rulers harvested from their hearts at the moment of death. The flask you carry contains the blood of 17 kings and queens who gave their lives for our civilization." The warmth in Marcus's chest suddenly felt very different. Not comforting anymore. Heavy. Accusatory. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "I didn't steal it. I just—" Silence. Theros spoke for the first time in English, and the word hit Marcus like a physical blow. "You possess what is sacred to us. By our law, this means death. Slow death. The draining of your blood, drop by drop, until nothing remains." 300 warriors shifted slightly, weapons rising an inch higher. The message was clear. Kira stepped closer, close enough that Marcus could see the flecks of amber in her golden eyes, close enough to feel the heat radiating from her skin. She was studying him again the same way she had the night before, but this time there was something else in her expression. Conflict, uncertainty. "You saved my life," she said quietly. "You used the blood of ancestors to heal me, knowing the penalty for aiding my kind. Knowing you would be executed by your own people if discovered." Why? It was a simple question with a complicated answer. Marcus could have talked about Sarah, about her dreams and her research and her belief that all life deserved compassion. He could have explained the promise he'd made, the 3 years of waiting, the instinct that had driven him to act. Instead, he said the only thing that felt true. "Because you were dying and because nobody deserves to die alone and afraid. My father taught me that a long time ago back in Texas." Something shifted in Kira's expression. The imperial mask cracked just for an instant, and underneath it, he glimpsed something almost human. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. Theros spoke again in the Velthari language, and Kira's jaw tightened. When she translated, her voice was carefully neutral. "My father says that your intentions do not matter. The law is clear. You have committed a grave offense against our people regardless of your reasons. But there is another way." This came from Kira herself, not a translation. "Our ancient laws provide for a path of redemption, the trial of honor. 3 tests to prove that your actions came from a place of true virtue rather than malice or greed." Theros rumbled something that sounded like a protest, but Kira cut him off with a gesture. Even the high commander of all Velthari forces deferred to his daughter when she wore that expression. "The tests are simple in concept," she continued. "First, the test of truth. You must open your mind to me, completely hiding nothing, allowing me to see every moment of your past that relates to the blood. If you lie, if you conceal, the ritual will burn your consciousness to ash." Marcus felt cold sweat forming on his back. And second, the test of loyalty. "You must prove that your allegiance can be trusted, that you will not betray those you have sworn to protect. And third," Kira's eyes held his for a long moment, "the test of sacrifice. You must demonstrate that you are willing to give your life for others, not in words, in action." The clearing fell silent. 300 warriors, 1 empress, 1 high commander, and 1 58-year-old washout from the United States Air Force, standing in the humidity of an alien jungle, with the fate of worlds hanging in the balance. Then Theros spoke, and whatever he said made Kira's face go pale. "What?" Marcus asked. "What did he say?" Kira turned to him slowly. 3 years ago, during the massacre on Kepler 442b, a human woman helped me escape. She gave me the blood of ancestors. She died protecting me and the children I was trying to save." The warmth in Marcus's chest turned to ice. "She had dark hair," Kira continued. Her voice strange and distant. "Green eyes, a kind smile. She told me her name before the soldiers came, before she pushed me into the jungle and told me to run." Marcus couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only stand there as the world tilted beneath his feet. "She said her name was Sarah, Sarah Cole, and she said that if I ever found her husband, I should tell him that she loved him, that she was proud of him, that she hoped he would understand why she did what she did." The photograph on his console, the smile that could light up a room, the promise she'd made him keep it safe until someone needs it more than we do. She'd known. Somehow Sarah had known that this moment would come, that one day the alien queen she died protecting would find her way to a broken man on a forgotten moon, and the circle would close. Kira's hand reached out and touched his chest directly over the mark she'd left the night before. "Your wife saved my life, Marcus Cole. She gave me the blood when I was dying. She sacrificed herself so that I could escape." Her voice cracked, imperial composure finally shattering. "For 3 years I have hunted the one who stole the sacred blood, and never knowing that he was the husband of my savior. Never knowing that the theft was a gift passed from her hands to yours." Theros stepped forward, his massive form casting both of them in shadow. When he spoke, his voice was softer than before. Kira translated with tears streaming down her purple cheeks. "My father says that the debt our people owe to Sarah Cole cannot be repaid. But perhaps in judging you, we can begin." Marcus felt his knees buckle. 3 years of grief, 3 years of guilt, 3 years of wondering why Sarah had run into that jungle instead of staying with him. And now he knew. She hadn't been running from anything. She'd been running toward her destiny. The test of truth, he heard himself say. When does it start? Kira wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. The gesture was surprisingly human, surprisingly vulnerable. Now, it starts now. Open your mind to me, Marcus Cole. Show me everything, and pray that what I find is worthy of the woman who died for my people. She pressed both palms against his temples, and the world exploded into light. He was 22 again, standing in the cockpit of an F-15 with enemy fire streaking past his canopy. Victor Harlan was on his wing, whooping with adrenaline, and together they were invincible. He was 35, holding Sarah's hand in a hospital room while a doctor explained that the pregnancy wasn't viable, that there would be no children, that some dreams weren't meant to come true. He was 48, receiving the assignment that would change everything. Reading classified briefings about a distant planet and a substance that could revolutionize human medicine. Then he was on Kepler 442b, and the memories turned dark. Kira saw it all, the wonder of discovery, the excitement of finding the Xerion deposits, the arrival of Harlan and his security team, the first whispers that something was wrong. The night Marcus found the orders on Harlan's tablet, the classified directive authorizing the elimination of all indigenous lifeforms in the extraction zone. She saw him confronting Harlan, saw the argument that turned violent, the gunshot that should have killed him, saw Sarah running into the jungle with the flask clutched to her chest, children in tow, a queen among them, saw the moment the second shot rang out, saw Sarah fall, saw Marcus crawling through blood and mud to reach her body, saw him finding the flask still warm from her hand, saw him pressing it to his chest and promising her ghost that he would keep it safe, saw 3 years of running, 3 years of hiding, 3 years of carrying her memory like a wound that would never heal. When Kira pulled her hands away, both of them were weeping. You did not steal, she whispered. You inherited. The blood passed from my people to Sarah, from Sarah to you. It was always meant to find its way home. Tharos stood very still, his granite features showing something that might have been shock. The warriors around them had lowered their weapons entirely. The test of truth is complete, Kira announced, her voice carrying across the clearing. Marcus Cole is innocent of theft. He is guilty only of honoring his wife's final wish. A murmur ran through the assembled warriors. Marcus caught fragments of their alien language, words he couldn't understand, but whose tone was unmistakable. Surprise, respect, wonder. Then the jungle erupted in thunder. 3 ships burst through the canopy, military dropships with angular hulls and weapon pods already glowing with charge. They circled the clearing, once their engines screaming, before touching down in the only open space available. Ramps lowered. Soldiers poured out, 15 of them, all armed with pulse rifles and wearing the black armor of the Frontier Reclamation Strike Force. At their head walked a man Marcus had hoped never to see again. Colonel Victor Harlan hadn't changed much in 3 years. Same predator's eyes, same cruel twist to his mouth, same way of moving that said he owned every inch of ground beneath his feet. The scar running down his temple was new, a souvenir from someone who'd almost managed to kill him. Almost, but not quite. Marcus, Harlan spread his arms wide, a mockery of welcome. 3 years I've been tracking your signal, and you lead me straight to the motherlode. An actual Velthari queen. The boys in R&D are going to lose their minds. The Velthari warriors surged forward, but Kira raised a hand and they stopped. Her eyes had gone cold, imperial mask firmly back in place. You are not welcome here, human. Leave or face the consequences. Harlan laughed. Consequences? Lady, I've got 3 destroyers in orbit with enough firepower to glass this entire moon. You've got pointy sticks and glowing tattoos. So how about you step aside, hand over the queen, and let me have a nice reunion with my old friend Marcus here. A young soldier near the back of Harlan's formation shifted uncomfortably. Marcus recognized the type. Young, idealistic, probably signed up thinking he was going to protect humanity from alien threats. The reality of Black Ops work hadn't broken him yet. Their eyes met, and the young man's widened. Sir, he said to Harlan, is that Colonel Marcus Cole, the pilot from Desert Storm? Harlan's expression flickered with annoyance. Former colonel, traitor, deserter. Take your pick. My father served under him in Kuwait. The young soldier's voice carried across the clearing. He said Colonel Cole was the most honorable officer he ever met. Said he saved 37 lives during the retreat from Sergeant Miller. Harlan's voice cracked like a whip. One more word, and I'll have you court-martialed before sunset. But the damage was done. The other soldiers were looking at Marcus differently now, seeing not a traitor, but a decorated veteran. A hero of a war they'd only read about in history books. Marcus stepped forward, placing himself between Harlan and Kira. His heart was pounding, but his voice came out steady. Victor, I know what you're doing. I know about Blackstone Defense. I know about the black market sales, the experiments, all of it. Walk away now, and maybe I don't tell the whole world how the great Colonel Harlan built his fortune on war crimes. Harlan's smile didn't waver, but something cold flickered behind his eyes. You've got nothing, no evidence, no witnesses, no proof. Just the word of a deserter against a decorated officer. How do you think that plays in Washington? I think it plays exactly how you've set it up to play. But here's the thing, Victor. Marcus felt the warmth in his chest pulse stronger, felt Kira's presence at his back like a furnace of pure power. I'm not fighting alone anymore. And some fights aren't about winning. They're about doing what's right, even when it costs you everything. For a long moment, the two men stared at each other across the clearing. 20 years of history hung between them. 20 years of brotherhood and betrayal, trust and treachery, a friendship that had curdled into something poisonous and dark. Then Harlan nodded slowly. 6 hours, Marcus. You've got 6 hours to hand over the Queen and the blood. After that, I stop asking nicely. He turned and walked back to his dropship soldiers falling in behind him. The young Sergeant Miller hesitated at the ramp, looking back at Marcus with something like desperate hope in his eyes. Then the ramps closed, the engines roared, and the ships vanished into the sky. Kira's hand landed on Marcus's shoulder. Her touch was warm, grounding, surprisingly gentle for a warrior queen. You have made an enemy today. I made that enemy 3 years ago. He just didn't know it until now. She turned him to face her, and in her golden eyes he saw something new. Respect, perhaps, or the beginning of trust. The test of loyalty approaches Marcus Cole. When Harlan returns, you will be forced to choose. Your species or your honor. Your survival or your soul. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was soft. I watched your memories. I saw the man you were, the man you became. I saw the love you carried for Sarah, the guilt that has eaten at you since her death. Marcus felt his throat tighten. She would be proud of you. What you did last night, saving me without knowing who I was, that was the action of a good man, a man worthy of her sacrifice. Before he could respond, she turned and began issuing orders in Velthari. Warriors moved to defensive positions. The clearing transformed into a military camp in minutes. Marcus watched it all from the ramp of his ship, Sarah's photograph clutched in his hand. 6 hours. 6 hours until everything changed. He looked down at the flask in his pocket, then up at the sky where Harlan's ships had disappeared. I hope you're watching, Sarah, he whispered. I hope you can see what's coming, because I'm going to need all the help I can get. In his chest, the mark pulsed steadily, a connection he still didn't understand binding him to a queen and a people and a destiny he'd never asked for. But then again, Marcus Cole had never been the kind of man who ran from a fight. Not when he was 22 and flying through enemy fire. Not when he was 58 and standing between an army and an empire. And definitely not now with Sarah's memory burning in his heart and the future of two civilizations hanging in the balance. The test was coming, and one way or another, Marcus Cole would face it. He owed Sarah that much. He owed himself that much. And maybe, just maybe, he owed the universe a chance to prove that one act of kindness could change everything. The ritual chamber existed in a space between worlds. Kira had led him there through tunnels that shouldn't have been possible, to passageways carved into the living rock of the moon by hands that had never known human tools. Bioluminescent moss clung to the walls, pulsing in rhythm, with something Marcus couldn't hear, but could feel in his bones, a heartbeat that belonged to the planet itself. 12 tribal elders sat in a perfect circle, their aged faces painted with symbols that glowed like dying stars. Tharo stood apart from them, arms crossed, watching Marcus with eyes that promised violence if the humans so much as breathed wrong. And at the center of it all, Kira waited on a raised platform of polished obsidian, her hands extended toward him. The test of truth began without warning. Kira pressed both palms against his temples, and Marcus felt his consciousness splinter into 1,000 fragments. Memories erupted from places he'd buried them, dragged into the light by a force that brooked no resistance. He was 22 again, climbing into the cockpit of an F-15 with Victor Harlan on his wing. He was 35, holding Sarah's hand in a hospital room, while a doctor explained that there would be no children. He was 48, reading classified briefings about a distant planet and a substance that could change everything. Then he was on Kepler 442b, and the memories turned into nightmares. Kira saw it all through his eyes. The wonder of first contact, the excitement of discovering Zirion and deposits that glowed like liquid starlight. The arrival of Harlan's security team, the whispered conversations that stopped whenever Marcus approached. The night he found the orders on Harlan's tablet, the classified directive authorizing the elimination of all indigenous life forms in the extraction zone. She felt his horror as he confronted his former wingman, felt the betrayal when Harlan laughed and called him naive, felt the bullet tear through his chest, dropping him to the jungle floor in a spray of blood and disbelief. And she saw Sarah, dark hair streaming behind her as she ran, green eyes blazing with determination. A flask clutched to her chest, and children, alien children, with purple skin and terrified golden eyes stumbling after her into the darkness. Kira watched through Marcus's fading vision as his wife led the survivors towards safety. Watched Sarah stop at the edge of the jungle, pressing the flask into the hands of a wounded Velthari female. Watched her lips move, forming words that Marcus couldn't hear, but Kira could somehow understand. Take this. Run. Find my husband if you survive. Tell him I love him. Tell him I'm proud. Tell him to keep fighting. The wounded Velthari was younger in the memory, her features less defined by centuries of command, but Kira recognized herself. She remembered this moment from the other side, remembered the human woman who had given her the sacred blood when she was dying, who had turned to face the soldiers so that Kira and the children could escape. The second gunshot echoed through both their minds. Sarah fell. Marcus screamed or tried to, but blood filled his throat and darkness claimed his vision. The last thing he saw was his wife's body crumpling to the ground, her hands still reaching toward him across the impossible distance. Kira wrenched her consciousness back, gasping as if she'd been drowning. Tears streamed down her purple cheeks, leaving tracks that glowed faintly in the dim light. Marcus swayed on his feet, the memories leaving him hollow and raw. She saved me, Kira's voice cracked. 3 years ago, your wife saved my life. She gave me the blood of ancestors. She died so that I could escape. I know. The words came out barely above a whisper. I've known since I woke up next to her body. I just never knew who she saved. Never knew if it mattered. It mattered. Kira stepped closer, close enough that he could see the individual tears tracing paths down her alien features. I have ruled my people for 2 centuries. I have led armies and negotiated treaties and made decisions that shaped the fate of civilizations. But I have never forgotten the human woman who looked at me, a stranger and enemy. By every definition, her people recognized and chose compassion over fear. The elders murmured among themselves, their ancient voices carrying tones of wonder and confusion. Theros stood frozen, his granite features showing something that might have been shock. But Kira wasn't finished. There is something else. She reached out and pressed her palm flat against Marcus's chest, directly over the mark she'd placed there. Something I saw in your memories that you don't understand. Something that explains why our connection is so strong. Marcus felt the warmth beneath her hand intensify, spreading through his body like liquid fire. When Harlan shot you, Kira continued, you should have died. The wound was fatal. No human medical technology could have saved you in time. But I didn't die. No, because Sarah refused to let you. Kira's amber gaze held as ancient and knowing. In your final moments of consciousness, when you thought everything was darkness, your wife crawled across the jungle floor to reach you. She was already wounded, already dying, but she used the last of her strength to open the flask and pour Zirion into your mouth. The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. He remembered Flash's fragments he'd dismissed as fever dreams. Sarah's face above him, blood on her lips, her hands shaking as she forced his jaw open. The taste of something sweet and electric on his tongue. her voice distant and fading, telling him to live. The blood of ancestors is not meant for humans, Kira said. We did not know what would happen if your species consumed it. But Sarah didn't care about the risks. She loved you enough to gamble everything on the chance that it might save you. What does that mean? Marcus's voice came out strangled. What did it do to me? It changed you. At the deepest level, it rewrote parts of your biology to incorporate Velthari genetic markers. You are still human, Marcus Cole, but you are no longer entirely human. She paused. It explains why the mark I gave you resonates so strongly, why you can feel our warriors through the connection, why the blood recognized you when you offered it to me. Part of you is part of us now. Sarah's final gift made you a bridge between our species before either of us knew such a bridge was possible. Marcus sank to his knees, overwhelmed by the weight of revelation. 3 years of guilt, 3 years of wondering why he had survived when Sarah died, and now he knew. She had saved him. Even in her final moments, bleeding out on an alien world, she had refused to let him go. Kira knelt beside him, her hand still pressed to his chest. The test of truth is complete, she announced to the assembled elders. Marcus Cole carries no deception in his heart. The blood came to him through sacrifice and love, not theft, and the connection between us was forged by his wife's dying wish. The elders responded with a complex harmony of sounds that Marcus couldn't interpret, but the hostility that had filled the chamber since his arrival was fading, replaced by something closer to reverence. Theros approached slowly, his massive form blocking out the bioluminescent light. When he spoke, his voice was softer than Marcus had ever heard it. The debt we owe Sarah Cole cannot be measured. She saved my daughter. She preserved the royal bloodline, and she created a bond between our peoples that we did not know existed. He paused, something shifting in his ancient eyes. The test of loyalty awaits human, but know this, whatever happens next, you have earned the respect of the High Commander. The war room materialized around them within minutes of leaving the ritual chamber. But before Kira could begin issuing orders, Marcus caught her arm. There's something you need to see first. He pulled the data chip from his pocket, the one Dr. Morrison had slipped him during that first confrontation. A scientist named Rachel Morrison gave this to me. She said it contains evidence of what Harlan's really doing. Kira studied the chip with narrowed eyes. You trust this human scientist? I trust that she was terrified when she gave it to me, and I trust that Harlan kills people who know too much. Marcus looked around the war room at the holographic displays and alien technology. Can your systems read human data formats? We have been studying your species for centuries. Of course we can. She took the chip and inserted it into a console that seemed to grow from the stone floor. The holographic display flickered, then resolved into images that made Marcus's blood run cold. The first file was a financial ledger, transactions between Frontier Reclamation Strike Force and something called Blackstone Defense Corporation. Numbers with too many zeros. Dates stretching back 3 years. $10 billion per liter. Kira read aloud, her voice tight. They are selling the blood of ancestors to private corporations. It gets worse. The second file was a video. Security footage from a facility Marcus didn't recognize, all concrete walls and fluorescent lights. In the center of the frame, a Velthari male hung suspended in some kind of harness tubes running from his arms to collection tanks that glowed with stolen blood. The male was still alive. His eyes were open, tracking the movements of scientists in white coats who checked readings and adjusted flow rates with clinical detachment. His mouth moved in what might have been a scream, but there was no audio. Kira's hand found Marcus's arm, her grip tight enough to bruise. 47 transactions in 3 years, Marcus said quietly. That's what Morrison's records show. 47 times Harlan has sold your people's blood to the highest bidder. How many of my people are in that place? According to these files, 53, captured over the past 3 years, held in a facility beneath the Nevada desert. Marcus hesitated. There's one more video you need to see. The third file was the worst. The camera showed a smaller cell, walls lined with monitoring equipment. In the center, strapped to a table that bristled with tubes and sensors, was a Velthari female. Younger than the others. Smaller. Her silver hair was matted and dull, her purple skin stretched tight over prominent bones. She looked directly at the camera, and even through the holographic display, Marcus could see the defiance burning in her sun-bright eyes. Kira made a sound that wasn't quite a scream and wasn't quite a word. Her whole body went rigid, the bioluminescent patterns on her armor flaring so bright that Marcus had to shield his eyes. Lyra, the name came out broken. That is my sister, that is Lyra. Theros appeared at her side, his granite features cracking with emotion that Marcus had never seen from the High Commander. He stared at the image of his younger daughter, at the tubes draining the life from her veins, and something ancient and terrible awakened in his eyes. She has been missing for 2 years. Kira's voice trembled with barely contained fury. We thought she was dead. We mourned her. She couldn't finish. Marcus watched the timestamp on the video 3 days ago. Lyra was still alive, still being harvested. The extraction rates in the file suggest she has maybe 72 hours, he said gently. After that, her body won't be able to regenerate fast enough to survive. Kira turned to him, and the Imperial mask was gone completely. In its place was something raw and desperate, a sister's love stripped of all pretense. We have to save her. We will. The facility is on Earth, beneath the Nevada desert. She shook her head. Even at maximum speed, it would take our ship days to reach your planet. And if we arrive with a fleet, your military will see it as an invasion. They will destroy the facility rather than let us take it. Then we don't arrive with a fleet. Everyone in the war room turned to look at Marcus. Harlan doesn't know you've seen these files. He thinks I'm just a washed-up deserter with no proof and no allies. If I go to him, if I let him take me to that facility, I can get inside. I can find Lyra. I can disable the security systems from within. Theros growled something in Velthari that needed no translation. Absolute rejection. You would die, Kira said flatly. You would walk into an enemy stronghold with no weapons, no backup, and no hope of escape. Harlan would kill you the moment you stop being useful. Probably. But if I can get a message out, if I can tell you where the facility is and how to get in, your warriors can do the rest. Marcus held her gaze. I'm the only one who can get inside without triggering a war, and your sister doesn't have time for us to find another way. The war room fell silent. 300 warriors, 12 tribal elders, 1 high commander, and 1 empress, all staring at a 58-year-old human who had just volunteered to die. Kira stepped closer, close enough that Marcus could feel the heat radiating from her skin, could see the individual flecks of amber in her eyes. You would sacrifice yourself for my sister. For my people, you barely know us. I know that Sarah died for you. I know that she believed your people were worth saving. Marcus touched the mark on his chest. And I know that she changed me into something more than human. Maybe this is why. Maybe this is what she wanted me to become. A martyr. A bridge. Kira stared at him for a long moment. Then she turned to her father and spoke in rapid Velthari, her voice carrying the weight of command that came from 2 centuries of rule. Theros argued back. His words were sharp, his gestures emphatic. Marcus didn't need a translation to understand the conflict. A father terrified of losing both his daughters. A commander unwilling to trust an outsider with the fate of his princess. The argument lasted several minutes. Other voices joined in, elders and warriors adding their opinions to the debate. The war room filled with the sounds of a civilization wrestling with an impossible choice. Then Kira said something that silenced everyone, even Theros. She turned back to Marcus, and when she spoke, her voice carried a weight that seemed to bend the air around them. I will not ask you to die alone. What? If you go to that facility, I go with you. She raised a hand to forestall his objection. One as empress, as a warrior. I will disguise myself, hide my identity, accompany you as a captured prisoner. When the time comes to strike, I will be there. Theros erupted. His voice shook the walls, made the holographic displays flicker. Marcus caught fragments of his fury words that needed no translation. Foolish, suicidal, unacceptable. Kira let him rage. When he finally fell silent, she spoke with quiet certainty. I am Empress of the 12 tribes. My word is law, and I am telling you, Father, that I will not send this man to die for my sister, while I hide behind the safety of our warriors. She paused. You taught me that a true leader never asks others to face dangers she would not face herself. Were those empty words? The High Commander's face contorted with conflicting emotions. Pride and fear, love and duty, the weight of 5 centuries pressing down on shoulders that suddenly looked tired. If you die, he said slowly, the succession falls to Lyra, and Lyra is the one we are trying to save. Then I suggest we not fail. The words hung in the air. Marcus recognized them. He had said almost exactly the same thing to Kira just hours ago. Theros closed his eyes. When he opened them again, the conflict was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like acceptance. The beacon, he said quietly, the mark you placed on him, it can be tracked anywhere in the galaxy. Then I will follow with every warrior we have. The moment you signal, we will come. He stepped forward and placed one massive hand on Marcus's shoulder. If my daughter trusts you with her life human, then I have no choice but to trust you as well. But know this, if she dies because of your failure, no force in the universe will protect you from my vengeance. Understood? Good. Theros turned away. Prepare the ships. We launch within the hour. The plan came together with the brutal efficiency of people who had no time for elegance. Marcus would allow himself to be captured by Harlan's forces, would feed them information about Velthari positions that was just accurate enough to be believed. Kira would accompany him as a prisoner, her identity hidden by a combination of physical disguise and technology that dampened her bioluminescent patterns. Once inside the facility, they would locate Lyra and the other prisoners. Marcus would disable the security systems using codes that Dr. Morrison had included in her data chip. And when the moment was right, Kira would activate the beacon in Marcus's chest, bringing 300 warriors down on the facility like the wrath of an angry god. It was a desperate plan, a plan with 100 points of failure and almost no margin for error. But it was the only plan they had. The Velthari gave Marcus an hour to prepare. He spent most of it in the cockpit of the Sarah's Hope, staring at his wife's photograph. I think I finally understand, he said to her frozen smile. Why you ran into that jungle. Why you gave the blood to a stranger. Why you saved me even when you were dying. The photograph didn't answer, but he could almost hear her voice in his memory, soft and certain and full of the faith that had defined her entire life. You saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself, some potential that I spent 3 years running away from. And now, he touched the mark on his chest. Now I'm finally becoming the man you always believed I could be. Footsteps behind him. He didn't need to turn around to know who it was. You are speaking to her. Kira's voice was gentle. To Sarah. I talk to her every day, every morning, and every night. It's probably crazy. It is not crazy. Kira moved to stand beside him, her eyes finding the photograph on the console. Among my people, we believe that the dead never truly leave us. They live on in the blood of ancestors, in the memories we carry, in the choices we make in their name. She would have liked that idea. What was she like? The question came softly, almost hesitantly. Not the memories I saw in your mind. Those were fragments, moments of crisis. I want to know who she was, the woman, not the martyr. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, gathering thoughts he had kept locked away for 3 years. She grew up in a small town in Vermont. Her father was a minister, the kind who actually believed what he preached. She told me once that she learned about compassion from watching him, how he treated everyone the same, regardless of who they were or where they came from. She sounds wise. She was, but she was also stubborn as hell. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. When she believed in something, nothing could change her mind. Not logic, not evidence, not the entire weight of human bureaucracy. She just kept pushing until the world bent to her will. That sounds familiar. It should. She's the reason I'm here. The reason I saved you that night in the jungle. The reason I'm about to walk into an enemy facility with almost no chance of walking out. Marcus finally turned to face Kira. She saw something in me, and she spent our entire marriage trying to make me see it too. I think she finally succeeded. Kira studied him with those ancient amber eyes, seeing depths that Marcus himself was only beginning to understand. She chose well, she said finally, when she saved you, when she gave you the blood, when she trusted you to finish what she started. Her hand rose to touch his face, her palm warm against his cheek. I understand now why the connection between us is so strong. It is not just the blood, it is her her love, her faith, her belief in what you could become. All of that lives in you now. And when I touch you, I touch the legacy she left behind. Is that why you're coming with me? Because of Sarah? Partly. Kira's expression shifted. But also because I have spent 2 centuries watching my people suffer while I played politics and weighed options and calculated acceptable losses. My sister has been in that facility for 2 years. 2 years of torture and harvesting while I mourned her and moved on with my life. You didn't know. No, but I should have. I should have searched harder, pushed further, refused to accept her death without proof. Her jaw tightened. This mission is not just about saving Lyra. It is about becoming the leader I should have been all along. The leader who runs toward danger instead of away from it. The leader Sarah Cole proved a human could be. Marcus held her gaze. In that moment, separated by species and centuries and the vast gulf of their different lives, they understood each other perfectly. Then let's go save your sister. The capture went exactly as planned. Marcus walked out of the jungle alone, hands raised calling for Harlan's men to hold their fire. The soldiers surrounded him within seconds. Rifles trained on his chest, voices barking commands. He made a show of obeying. Behind him, hidden in the undergrowth with technology dampening every trace of her presence, Kira waited. They brought him to Harlan, who received the news of his surrender with the smug satisfaction of a predator who had always known his prey would eventually tire. I knew you'd come to your senses. Harlan circled him slowly, enjoying the moment. The Velthari positions, the fleet coordinates. Give me everything and maybe I'll let you live long enough to see your alien friends burn. Marcus gave him information, carefully selected truths mixed with strategic lies enough to seem valuable without actually compromising Kira's forces. He watched Harlan's eyes light up with greed, watched the wheels turning in that calculating mind. There's one more thing, Marcus said. The Empress. I know where she's hiding. Harlan stopped circling. His predator's eyes sharpened. You're going to give me the Queen. She trusts me. She'll come if I call her, but I want something in return. You're not exactly in a position to negotiate. Maybe not, but you want her badly enough to hear me out. Marcus held his gaze. I want immunity, full pardon for everything, and I want to watch when you take her down. The lie came easily, wrapped in enough genuine bitterness to taste like truth. 3 years of grief and guilt channeled into a performance that would have earned him an Oscar in another life. Harlan studied him for a long moment. Then he smiled. Welcome back to the winning team, Marcus. They captured Kira an hour later exactly as planned. She played her role perfectly, struggling just enough to seem genuine, cursing in Velthari, with a fury that made even Harlan's hardened soldiers flinch. The disguise held. The technology dampening her bioluminescence worked. And when they loaded her onto the dropship bound for Nevada, nobody noticed that the prisoner's amber eyes held not fear, but calculation. The flight took 6 hours. Marcus spent most of it strapped to a jump seat, watching the Earth grow larger through the porthole, thinking about everything that was about to happen. Beside him, Kira sat in restraints that looked far more secure than they actually were. The Velthari had provided her with equipment that would dissolve the bindings at a touch, weapons concealed in places human scanners couldn't detect. She caught his eye once during the descent. A single glance that communicated everything words could not. Together, whatever happens. The Nevada facility spread beneath them like a wound in the desert. Marcus watched through the dropship's porthole as they descended toward a cluster of buildings that looked utterly unremarkable from the air. Standard military installation. Nothing to suggest the horrors hidden below. They took him down in a freighted elevator, the descent lasting long enough to make his ears pop. 7 levels, just as Morrison's files had indicated. 7 levels of laboratories and holding cells carved into the bedrock. The screaming started on level 4. Sounds that would haunt Marcus forever leaked through reinforced doors. Sobbing in languages humanity had never learned. Prayers to gods whose names couldn't be pronounced by human tongues. They passed an observation window, and Marcus forced himself to look. A Velthari male lay strapped to a table, tubes running from his arms to collection tanks that glowed with stolen blood. His eyes were open, but empty consciousness retreated to somewhere the pain couldn't reach. Impressive, isn't it? Harlan had followed his gaze. The Zerion in their blood has remarkable regenerative properties. We've kept some subjects alive for months, harvesting continuously. Marcus's stomach churned. You're a monster. I'm a businessman. Supply and demand. They stopped at level 7. Through reinforced glass, Marcus could see a figure huddled in the corner of a cell, smaller than the others, younger. Lyra Velthari lifted her head and sun-bright eyes met his through the barrier. Purple skin stretched tight over prominent bones. Hair that had probably once been silver, now matted and dull. Arms covered in needle tracks. Behind Marcus, still in restraints, Kira made a sound that was barely human. Marcus felt her rage through the bond, a fury so intense it threatened to overwhelm his own emotions. The princess. Harlan's voice carried obscene satisfaction. High-value asset. She'll be dead within a week at current extraction rates, but we'll get every drop we can. Something snapped inside Marcus Cole. Not broke. Forged. You're going to pay for this. His voice came out quiet, almost calm. I'm going to make sure the whole world knows what you've done. And when they come for you, I'll be there, watching. Harlan's smile flickered. For an instant, something like doubt crossed his features. Then Marcus touched his chest, pressing his palm flat against the mark that Kira had given him. And 300 light years away, an army began to move. The chaos spread through the facility like wildfire. Marcus could hear gunfire echoing down the corridors, the distinctive hum of Velthari weapons mixing with the crack of human rifles. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut throughout the complex as security protocols activated. Harlan grabbed Marcus by the collar, dragging him away from Lyra's cell. What did you do? How did they find this place? Marcus smiled despite the pain in his shoulder. The mark. The connection your people never noticed because they were too busy looking for technology. He tapped his chest. Wherever I go, she can follow. Rage contorted Harlan's features. He threw Marcus against the wall and drew his pistol. I'll kill you myself before I let them rescue you. Then you'd better hurry, because she's not coming for me. Marcus slumped to the floor, too weak to stand, but not too weak to hope. She's coming for her sister, and nothing you have is going to stop her. The door at the end of the corridor exploded inward. Kira Velthari stepped through the smoking wreckage like a goddess of war. Her armor blazed with bioluminescent fury patterns racing across its surface like living flame. Behind her came warriors, dozens of them, their weapons cutting through facility guards with terrible efficiency. And at her side, rifle raised and face set with grim determination, was Sergeant Danny Miller. He'd made his choice after all. Harlan fired twice, but Kira moved faster than the bullets, her arm sweeping up to deflect the shots with a forearm guard that sparked and sang. She crossed the distance between them in 3 strides and lifted him off his feet with one hand wrapped around his throat. Where is my sister? Her voice resonated with barely contained violence. Harlan choked feet, kicking uselessly. His gun fell from fingers gone weak. The cell. Marcus pointed from his position on the floor. End of the corridor, glass door. Kira turned, still holding Harlan suspended, and saw Lyra through the observation window. Something shattered in her expression. She dropped Harlan like garbage and ran to the cell. Miller appeared at Marcus's side, helping him to his feet. The files went viral, sir. Posted them to every news outlet before we launched. Whatever happens here, the truth is out. Your father would be proud. I hope so. Miller's jaw tightened. I really hope so. The cell door yielded to Kira's strength with a shriek of tortured metal. She rushed inside, dropping to her knees beside her sister's crumpled form. Velthari words poured from her, too fast and emotional for Marcus to follow. Lyra's hand rose weakly to touch her sister's face. Golden eyes fluttered open. You came. Her voice was barely audible. I knew you would come. Always. Kira gathered her sister in her arms. I will always come for you. Marcus watched the reunion with tears he didn't bother hiding. This was what Sarah had died for. This was what she had believed was possible. The moment shattered when Harlan moved. He'd recovered his pistol while everyone was distracted. Now he pressed the barrel against the back of Marcus's head. Nobody moves. His voice cracked with desperation. Or the traitor days. The Velthari warriors froze. Miller's rifle came up but hesitated. Kira rose slowly, Lyra still cradled in her arms. Her golden eyes fixed on Harlan with an intensity that would have made lesser men weep. You think killing him will save you? Her voice was ice. You are surrounded by 300 warriors. You are 7 levels underground with no escape route. Your ships have been destroyed. Your soldiers have surrendered or fled. And then I'll die knowing I took something from you. Harlan's gun pressed harder against Marcus's skull. You aliens think you are so superior, but humans know how to hate. We know how to hurt. And sometimes that's enough. Marcus felt the cold metal against his scalp, felt his heart pounding in his chest, felt the mark pulsing with desperate energy, and felt something else, something reaching through the connection he shared with Kira. Trust me. 2 words. Not spoken aloud but transmitted through the bond Sarah had created with her dying breath. Marcus let his body go limp, dropping suddenly toward the floor. Harlan's shot went wild, punching into the ceiling. Before he could adjust his aim, Kira was there. She moved faster than anything human eyes could track. One moment she was across the room. The next her hand was wrapped around Harlan's gun hand, squeezing until bones cracked. Harlan screamed. The pistol clattered to the floor. Kira lifted him by the throat again, his feet dangling inches off the ground. Her face was inches from his golden eyes blazing. You killed the woman who saved my life. You tortured my sister. You butchered my people for profit. Each word dropped like a stone into still water. Give me one reason I should not tear you apart where you stand. Harlan's mouth worked, but only gasping sounds emerged. Kira! Marcus had pulled himself upright, leaning heavily against Miller. Don't. She didn't turn. He deserves death. He deserves justice. Marcus forced himself to stand without support. Human justice. The kind that comes with trials and testimony and the whole world watching. If you kill him now, he becomes a martyr, another victim of alien aggression. But if you let him face what he's done, then his own people condemn him. Kira's grip didn't loosen. His legacy becomes shame. Yes. For a long moment, nothing moved. The facility hummed with distant sounds of combat. Velthari warriors waited in perfect stillness. Miller held his breath. Then Kira opened her hand. Harlan dropped to the floor, gasping, clutching his broken wrist. 2 warriors immediately moved forward, binding his hands with restraints that glowed with contained energy. Kira turned to Marcus. You show mercy to the man who murdered your wife. Sarah didn't die for revenge. Marcus held her gaze. She died believing that understanding was possible, that compassion could transcend species. If I kill him out of hatred, her sacrifice means nothing. Something shifted in Kira's expression, something that might have been understanding, or respect, or something deeper. You are a strange human, Marcus Cole. So I've been told. The cleanup took hours. Marcus spent most of it in the facility's medical bay, having his shoulder treated by a Velthari healer whose methods felt more like magic than medicine. The wound closed beneath hands that glowed with soft, violet light, leaving only a faint scar that would fade with time. Through the observation window, he watched the rescue operation unfold. 53 Velthari prisoners, some barely alive, being carried from their cells by warriors who wept openly at what they found. Lyra wrapped in thermal blankets, being stabilized by healers who worked with desperate intensity. Miller found him there as dawn broke over the Nevada desert. It's done, sir. The young sergeant looked exhausted but satisfied. Every news outlet on the planet is running the story. Congressional hearings are being scheduled. Blackstone's stock crashed to 0 an hour ago. And Harlan? Federal marshals took custody. He's being transported to Washington for arraignment. Miller paused. They're calling it the biggest war crimes case since Nuremberg. Marcus absorbed this in silence. 3 years of running. 3 years of guilt and grief and wondering if Sarah's sacrifice had meant anything. And now finally the truth was out. It wasn't redemption. Nothing could bring Sarah back or erase the memories of that jungle night, but it was something. The Empress is asking for you. Miller's voice pulled him back to the present. She says there's one more thing that needs to happen before this is over. The ceremony took place on the surface in a clearing that had been transformed overnight. Velthari warriors stood in concentric circles, their armor glowing in the early morning light. The rescued prisoners, those who strong enough to stand, had been given places of honor near the center. Marcus walked through the crowd alone, feeling every eye upon him. The mark in his chest pulsed steadily, synchronized with 300 hearts beating as one. Kira waited at the center, magnificent in ceremonial robes that seemed to flow like living water. Beside her stood Theros, his massive form casting long shadows in the dawn light, and supported by attendants, pale but present, was Lyra. Marcus Cole, Kira's voice carried across the clearing. You have endured the test of truth and proven yourself honest. You have faced the test of loyalty and chosen honor over belonging. Now you stand before us having completed the test of sacrifice. The test required you to demonstrate willingness to give your life for others. You did more than that. She stepped closer. You entered an enemy stronghold, knowing you might not escape. You stood between my sister and the man who would have killed her. You showed mercy when hatred would have been easier. And you showed my people something we had forgotten, that humans are capable of more than destruction. That the woman who saved my life 3 years ago was not an anomaly, but an example of what your species can become. She reached into her robes and withdrew a crystalline pendant that pulsed with inner light. Marcus recognized it immediately. The same violet glow that marked Velthari's skin. The same warmth that lived in the mark over his heart. This is the mark of ancestors. It contains the blood of 17 rulers who gave their lives for our civilization. The same substance your wife preserved. The same substance that flows now in small part through your veins. She placed the pendant around his neck, her fingers brushing his collarbone. From this day forward, you are Vel Marcus, blood of Velthari. Your enemies are our enemies. Your cause is our cause. You are no longer a stranger among us. The warriors responded with a sound that shook the ground, fists striking chests in perfect unison, a salute that had welcomed honored allies for millennia. I don't know if I deserve this. Marcus's voice came out rough. You do. Kira's hand lingered on his chest. And one day you will believe it. Theros stepped forward, his ancient eyes holding something that looked almost like warmth. The debt we owe Sarah Cole passes now to you, he said. She saved my daughter. She preserved our future. And in her final act, she created a bond between our peoples that we did not know we needed. My father has something else to say. Kira's expression shifted slightly. Something he has never said to any outsider in 500 years. Theros inclined his head, the gesture carrying weight that transcended words. Welcome to the family, Vel Marcus. The crowd erupted. The celebration lasted through the day and into the night. Marcus found himself surrounded by Velthari, who wanted to clasp his hand to touch the pendant at his throat to thank him in halting English for what he had done. Miller and the other defectors were similarly honored. Veldani, the warriors called the young sergeant, and his face flushed with embarrassed pride every time he heard it. But eventually the crowds thinned and the noise faded, and Marcus found himself alone on a ridge overlooking the Nevada desert. The sun was setting, painting the sand in shades of gold and crimson. Kira found him there, as he had somehow known she would. You are thinking of her. It wasn't a question. Always, Marcus touched the pendant. I keep wondering what she would say, if she could see what her sacrifice created. I knew her only briefly. Kira moved to stand beside him. But in those brief moments, she showed me more courage than I had seen from humans in centuries. She did not calculate. She did not hesitate. She saw children in danger, and she acted. That was Sarah, always running toward trouble. You are the same, Kira turned to face him. I have watched you these past days, in battle and in council, in moments of triumph and moments of pain. You carry her with you in everything you do. I don't know how to be anyone else. Then do not try. She reached up to touch his face, her palm warm against his cheek. You asked what the mark between us could become. I have an answer if you wish to hear it. Marcus felt his heart accelerate. The connection between them hummed with potential. Tell me. It could become partnership. Two people from different worlds building something new together. Not replacing what you lost, but honoring it, growing from it. Her golden eyes searched his. I am not asking you to forget Sarah. I am asking you to remember her by living fully. Marcus thought about the question, about Sarah's memory and Kira's offer, about the future stretching out before him, strange and terrifying and beautiful. I'd like that. The words came slowly drawn from somewhere deep. I'd like to try. Kira smiled, and it transformed her face from imperial mask to something achingly real. Then we begin. Together. The Velthari command ship broke orbit 3 days later, carrying rescued prisoners and human refugees toward a planet Marcus had never seen. He stood at the observation deck watching Earth shrink to a blue marble against the infinite black. Miller appeared beside him, awkward in the Velthari robes he'd been given. Strange, isn't it? The young sergeant's voice was quiet. 3 weeks ago, I was following orders I didn't question. Now I'm on an alien ship heading to a planet that humans have never visited. Having second thoughts? No. Miller shook his head firmly. My father used to say that the measure of a man isn't where he comes from, but what he stands for. I know what I stand for now. Your father was a wise man. He was. He is. Miller turned to face Marcus. He always said you were the best officer he ever served under. Said you never asked anyone to do something you wouldn't do yourself. Said you treated everyone with respect regardless of rank. I tried. You succeeded. Miller straightened, something like resolve settling into his features. Whatever comes next, sir, I'm honored to face it with you. He walked away, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts and the stars. Kira found him there an hour later, as she always seemed to. We will arrive at Velthari Prime in 6 days. She moved to stand beside him. The Council has agreed to establish formal relations with Earth, the first treaty between our peoples. That's good. It is more than good. It is unprecedented. 3 years ago, we were on the brink of war. Now we are on the threshold of something that could change both our civilizations forever. Marcus turned to face her. In the starlight, her purple skin seemed to glow from within, and her golden eyes held depths he was only beginning to understand. Sarah would have loved this, seeing our peoples working together. She made it possible. Kira's hand found his. Her sacrifice planted the seed. You nurtured it, and now it grows into something neither of us could have imagined alone. What happens when we reach your homeworld? Ceremonies, negotiations, the formal establishment of the alliance. She paused. And a conversation I have been meaning to have with you. What conversation? Kira's expression softened in a way he'd never seen before. About the future, about what we are building together, about possibilities that I thought were closed to me centuries ago. She squeezed his hand. But that conversation can wait. For now, rest. Heal. Let yourself believe that the hardest part is behind us. Is it? No. She smiled, and there was both warmth and warning in her eyes. The hardest part is learning to live with hope after years of survival, learning to build instead of simply enduring, learning to open your heart when every instinct tells you to protect it. Marcus looked out at the stars streaming past. Somewhere behind them, Earth was dealing with the aftermath of revelations that would reshape human society. Somewhere ahead, a civilization waited to welcome him as one of their own. And somewhere in his chest, the mark pulsed steadily, connecting him to a queen and a people in a future he'd never dared to imagine. 58 years old, he said quietly. I never thought life could start over this late. It can. Kira moved closer, her shoulder touching his. It is, and you do not have to face it alone. They stood together in silence, watching the universe unfold before them. Two people from different worlds, bound by sacrifice and choice, and the stubborn belief that tomorrow could be better than yesterday. It wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. And in the vast and different cosmos, beginnings were the rarest miracles of all. Marcus Cole, former Air Force colonel, widower, exile, had spent 3 years running from his past. Now finally he was ready to run toward his future. He looked at the photograph of Sarah he'd brought aboard, her smile frozen in time. Thank you, he whispered, for everything, for believing in me even when I couldn't believe in myself, for giving me a second chance I didn't know I needed. The stars blurred past. The ship hummed with quiet power, and somewhere in the observation deck of a vessel carrying him to a new home, Marcus Cole finally let himself hope. He owed Sarah that much. He owed himself that much. And maybe, just maybe, the universe had finally decided to agree. Fankadisan. The ceremony on Velthari Prime drew thousands. Marcus stood in the Temple of Ancestors, surrounded by more alien faces than he could count. The elders chanted in harmonies that resonated with the crystal walls. Kira faced him across the ceremonial circle, magnificent in imperial regalia. Behind her, Lyra stood straight and strong, her recovery nearly complete. Theros watched from the gathering's edge, his expression no longer hostile, but proud. Danny Miller and the other defectors waited nearby wearing Velthari ceremonial robes with visible pride. They had found their place. They had found their purpose. Vel Marcus, Kira's voice echoed through the temple. Blood of Velthari, bridge between worlds. Today we honor not just what you have done, but what you represent. The possibility of peace, the power of choice, the truth that one person making the right decision at the right moment can change the fate of civilizations. She stepped forward and placed both hands on his shoulders. You gave me one sip of water when I was dying. Now I give you a family, a home, a future. Marcus felt tears streaming down his face and didn't bother to hide them. Sarah would be proud, he managed. She is proud. Kira's voice dropped to a whisper. She lives in you, in every choice you make, in every life you touch. That is the truest immortality any of us can hope for. The ceremony concluded with a celebration that lasted through the night, but eventually Marcus found himself alone on a balcony overlooking the crystal spires of the Velthari capital. Kira joined him as the first sun rose over the alien horizon. You are quiet. Just thinking. He turned to face her. About everything that led to this moment. About Sarah, about you, about the strange path the universe laid out for me. And what have you concluded? Marcus smiled, the expression feeling natural for the first time in years. That I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Kira's hand found his. The mark in his chest pulsed with warmth. Then welcome home, Marcus Cole. They stood together as the sun rose higher, painting the sky in colors that had no names in any human language. Behind them, a civilization prepared to embrace its newest member. Ahead of them, a future waited to be written. And somewhere across the stars on a small blue planet called Earth, the story of Sarah Cole was being told. The woman who gave her life for strangers. The woman who proved that compassion could cross any divide. The woman who changed everything with one act of selfless courage. Her legacy lived on. In the man she loved. In the alliance she made possible. In every human in Velthari who chose understanding over fear. You gave me one sip of water, Kira said softly, and I gave you a universe. Marcus squeezed her hand. I think that's a fair trade. The suns continued to rise. The future continued to unfold. And Marcus Cole, once lost, finally found his way home.